As somebody who is an avid watcher of horror movies, the one thing that I really love about horror movies is what they say about our society and what we are afraid of at the time. Typically, horror movies are portraying some big, bad, scary other that we do not typically know. But sometimes the big, bad, scary other is just women, with the archetypes of the seductress, the witch, especially the witch. We as a society are afraid of what an unruly woman can do. This fear of women goes back all the way to the whole story of Adam and Eve, and how to this day Eve is still blamed for all of the sin and the hardship that we as humanity face, even though Adam also ate that apple. If you know, you know. This fear of women, but specifically unruly women, have only gotten worse as we have seen a rise of feminism. As women fight for their rights to their own bodies and their own lives, this has caused the pendulum to swing in the opposite way, where a lot of men, specifically conservative men, are actively trying to take away the rights that women have fought for. And at the time that I originally scripted this video, I never thought that things would have gotten this bad. But as it's been several months since Roe v. Wade, and I even think years, because I wrote this script a long time ago, we can really see what the fear of women and their bodily autonomy can lead to. And that is why I want to talk about one of my favorite horror movies of all time, Malignant. Malignant and the horrors that it depicts are a one-to-one example of how bad things can get when people fear women and their bodily autonomy. And so in today's video, in order to celebrate my Ella Enchanted series, I am going to be talking about Malignant and why Malignant scares me so much. Hi guys, welcome back to Ella Pastoral. You have actually stumbled upon my Ella Enchanted series, which is a series I do every year around Halloween in order to celebrate my love of everything spooky, scary, and overall awful. Like I said in the intro, today we are going to be talking about one of my favorite horror movies, Malignant, and the deep dread that I feel whenever I watch that movement, and how it's such a good example of what happens when people take away women's right to choose. But before I begin my analysis on Malignant and why I find that movie so scary, I want to say special thanks to all of my patrons who have supported me throughout the entire year. You guys have seriously been holding it down for me when YouTube gave me that channel strike for whatever I did, and all of the demonetization issues that I've been going through. Y'all are really the real ones. But let's hop back into the movie. So Malignant is a very triggering movie, so I'm just going to put some of the trigger warnings / content warnings for the things that are going to be discussed in this video, because it's going to get intense. Malignant is a movie about violence against women. Malignant at its very core deals with the relationship that violence has to women, from generation A to generation B to even generation C. Malignant at its very core deals with the idea of violence and its relationship to women between generations. We see this with the very first opening scene, where the female doctor, Dr. Weber to be specific, is thrown into a very violent situation where she is going to have to deal with one of her violent patients by the name Gabriel, and her job is to subdue this violent man. This one scene sets the tone for the entire movie and plays into some of the very important themes that this movie is trying to tell us. When you think of a typical hospital setting, what you typically imagine in your head is one doctor who has a plethora of subservient female nurses who all work in the medical setting. But the movie Malignant immediately flips that on its head by having Dr. Weber, one of the only female doctors that we are going to see in this movie, be in charge. And despite all of the warnings that her female subordinates, who are the nurses in this movie, are trying to give her by saying that Gabriel is dangerous, Gabriel is scary, Dr. Weber knows in her heart of hearts that she is the only one who is going to be able to subdue Gabriel. Despite what our society typically tells us about women, that we are weak, that we are subservient, that we need a man to come save us from the dangers of the world, Dr. Weber says F that, and she is able to stand up for herself as well as the female nurses. Gabriel has literally been inflicting violence on all of the women around him, and we see this with how he is literally obliterating all of the nurses whose job it is to literally take care of him. But does Gabriel care about that? No. What he cares about is inflicting violence on these women. But despite this extremely graphic scene, we can see that Dr. Weber is able to inflict some of the violence that Gabriel was giving the women back to him. And this entire opening scene literally sets the tone for the entire movie, because now we are going to flip over to our main character, Maddie, and see how violence is enacted towards her in her own personal life. So our main character, Maddie, is just like me, and she is a nurse. She has just come back home from her awful 12-hour shift, and she is having a hard time. Kind of mirroring the nurses who were abused at the hands of Gabriel, a man, Maddie comes home to also be abused by a man, but the man in question isn't Gabriel, it's her husband. Maddie, like a lot of women who I know who are nurses, is pregnant, and her pregnancy is literally so strenuous and is taking a toll on her. And instead of receiving encouraging words from her husband after her brutal 12-hour shift while carrying this really hard pregnancy, her husband says some of the worst vindictive words I've ever heard a man say to his pregnant partner. He says, "You need to stop getting pregnant. How many times do I have to see my children die inside of you? Are you really going to blame me for this?" And then he proceeds to shove her pregnant belly so roughly that it causes her to miscarry. And what really gets me, he ends the whole berating segment by saying, "Are you really gonna blame me for this?" And then proceeds to violently push her stomach. And what really gets me about this is that if you guys know what nurses go through in their shifts, for Maddie to literally be working 12 hours, because most nurses work 12 hours, to come home and then be violently berated by her good-for-nothing husband like this finally causes Maddie to snap, because we can see that this isn't the first time that Maddie's good-for-nothing husband has inflicted verbal abuse towards her. And so Maddie decides to stand up for herself and specifically stand up for the life of her unborn baby. And instead of realizing that, hey, maybe I shouldn't be verbally abusing my tired pregnant wife, Maddie's husband says F all that and decides to slam her head against the wall, leaving a very gooey blood mark on the wall for all of us to see. And like a lot of women in our own society who are pregnant and have abusive partners, the most strenuous time for a woman is during their pregnancy. That is when we see the highest rates of domestic violence. It's a whole psychological thing that I'm not going to get into right now, but straight women who are in partnerships with men are more likely to face violence in their pregnancy because of a whole plethora of reasons, but a lot of the time is due to their vulnerability during pregnancy. And this is the second time we see violence against women in the movie, but sadly it will not be our last. Maddie is somehow able to escape the abusive hands of her husband and is able to barricade herself in her bedroom. And luckily for us, Maddie's husband is not going to stick around for too long, because the next victim of the demon monster in this movie is that awful man. I could not even feel bad when the monster got him and he had him twisted like a pretzel, because he deserved it. And this is the only time in this entire video that I'm gonna give Gabriel his props or whatever, because he's also abusing women, so not too much on Gabriel. And the next member who falls to the violence of Gabriel is another member of his healthcare team. And Gabriel's weird. Instead of just killing this lady, he's like, how about I kidnap you and put you in like my dungeon? And per usual, Gabriel is a weirdo. So instead of just killing this lady like Loki he's been doing to everybody else, he's like, why don't I kidnap you and put you in my dungeon? It's weird. So in the first 30 minutes of this movie, we see a bunch of violence towards women in positions of power. But the next scene that we see, I feel like is the most gruesome, and sadly Maddie, our main character, has to be subjected to it. So while doing laundry, Maddie is kind of entrapped in this vision, apparition, third mental space type thing. It's low-key weird, and she sees Dr. Weber. Dr. Weber is looking at Maddie and she's screaming, why are you here? Why are you here? Why are you here? Our girl Maddie is lost, because the last time she checked, she was doing laundry. Maddie insists that she is not in Dr. Weber's house and that she's in her house, but that doesn't matter, because yet again we are going to see Maddie's bodily autonomy taken away from her as she's transported into this dreamscape where she cannot control what her body is doing. At this time, Maddie is forced to watch the brutal murder of Dr. Weber, and sadly for our girl Maddie, she is getting the best seats in town to the brutal murder of our girl Dr. Weber. Rest in peace, Dr. Weber, you did not deserve this. All you wanted to do was do your job. But Maddie is traumatized. Sadly for our girl Maddie, she is forced to watch the brutal murder of Dr. Weber, a woman who she has no idea who she is, but will sadly play a huge part into her story. All of the violence that we have seen so far in this movie goes to show one thing: any woman who has the audacity to be in any position of authority or even have any bodily autonomy must be punished in any possible way. Gabriel's deliberate action of choosing Dr. Weber's most prized Surgeon of the Year award and striking her and bludgeoning her to death even proves this point even more, because he didn't have to do that. But he did. he did, and it was deliberately evil. Gabriel's blatant disrespect to Dr. Weber and her most prized award, which is like her best surgeon of the year award, and how he literally like molds it and like conforms it and like bastardizes it into his weapon of choice for the rest of the movie, is literally a direct reflection of how our society doesn't respect women, and especially our accomplishments. I see this talking point so often, and that's how I felt like when I was watching this scene. Because so many times I'll hear men say, oh, you got a degree? You think a man cares about your degree? Like, who cares what a man thinks about my degree? It's my degree. It's my accomplishment. And over again, we'll see how men literally dog women and their accomplishments time and time again. It's so gross. I don't know if y'all were on TikTok at this time, but y'all remember that dude who went to that Christian college and he was literally doing the commensuration speech or whatever, and he was like, yeah, I know you spent 4 years getting the degree, but what you should really be happy about is going back to your husbands and being a wife and mother. Like, these women did not spend 4 years getting a degree. Like, what am I missing? But this is literally what our society thinks about women, because we have to remember that the university approved the speech before he said that nonsense in front of their graduate. But I digress. Let's hop back into the movie. So the next portion of this video has to do with the re-victimization of Maddie. Maddie is traumatized. Like, literally from the first moment we saw her, she could not catch a break, and she is literally going to be re-victimized time and time again as Gabriel forces her into this dreamscape. The repeated victimization that our girl Maddie faces throughout the whole entirety of the Malignant movie is a direct one-to-one parallel of how women in our own society, outside of film, outside of media, have to go through in order to get any type of justice. These women will be re-victimized over and over again and have their bodies violated, all in the pursuit of justice. And I have several examples before we hop back into the movie. In cases of sexual violence, a woman will have to have her body re-traumatized in order for any evidence to be taken. If you go right now and you look at the process of getting a rape kit, and what they have to do in order to collect evidence is just a trigger for the woman who went through that violence. Only for me to find out that a lot of these rape kits that these poor women have to do don't even be getting tested. It be ACAB, y'all. It really be ACAB. And don't even get me started on revenge porn and how we still as a society haven't figured out what the hell we want to do in terms of prosecuting people who are perpetuators of revenge porn. Revenge porn, for those who don't know, is practically like, let's say I'm with a guy, we break up, and to get back at me or whatever, he'll send my nudes out on the dark web in these creepy Telegram groups to his friends, to my church. It's that type of energy, right? And in order for you to prove that, hey, those are my nudes that this evil man is spreading, I have to resend my nudes for them to be like, When I found that out, that literally ruined my day, because the whole point of me reporting that I'm a victim of a revenge crime is so nobody will see my body again. But the way our laws currently work is like, actually you're going to have to show your body to more people. And this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about re-victimization. A popular case of a woman having to re-victimize herself for the sake of justice, but also having to re-traumatize herself, has to be the whole Amber Heard Johnny Depp situation. I will never forgive y'all for the way y'all acted during this whole trial. It's borderline gross just having to say these words out of my mouth, but I need y'all to see what I'm talking about. So when the whole Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial was happening, right, Amber Heard had to practically give her rape testimony about how her husband brutalized her, right? And what really triggered me about this situation is that people turned her rape testimony into a meme. It was literally days on my timeline where I would see people taking her testimony about how she was literally raped and making it like in a ha ha he he way. And it was so disgusting. It was honestly so disgusting, because it wasn't a one-off. It wasn't one weird weirdo who was doing this and everybody was like, yo, what the hell? It was several people doing it, and it was just so triggering, because even for the people who were like, oh, I don't think she was actually SA'd, imagine how all of the SA victims, I seriously don't even know how to put this into words, but seeing someone come out and give their rape testimony, because that's what it was, and seeing how people were so quick and so ready to turn it into a meme, that triggered me hard. And sadly, a lot of women in our society are like Amber Heard. A lot of women in our society are just like our main character Maddie, continually having to be re-victimized and no one taking it seriously. Maddie is sadly a helpless victim in her own body. She is forced to watch Gabriel over and over murder these people, and she can do nothing but watch. Maddie is very strong. I have to give her props for that. She continues to scream and beg and tries to practically fight what is happening to her, but Gabriel is stronger than her and it just doesn't work. Maddie is forced to watch Gabriel brutalize and subjugate all of these people, but specifically women, and honestly Maddie is having none of it. Like a lot of women, Maddie decides to go to someone who she trusts, who knows will be on her side, and decides to tell her sister of all of the violence that she is facing at the hands of Gabriel. And like a lot of women in her position, Maddie goes to someone who she can trust, and that is her beloved sister, who is actually so hilarious in this movie. I think she's like a princess, like a Disney cosplayer thing. Like she's like those girls who dress up to go to kids' birthday parties, but Maddie's sister is an OG. Like she's a real one for real. And so she's like, yo, I believe you when you're saying that there is an entity that's harassing you. Let's go to the police station. And I just love Maddie's sister in this movie. I love a good female friendship arc. Is always gonna do it for me. But sadly, this scene with Maddie and her sister going to the police station to report the violence that's being inflicted on her is a sad reality that many women have to go through. And like a lot of women who decide to report the violence that they're facing at the hands of a man to the police gaslight the hell out of Maddie and her sister. They're looking at my girl like, yeah, okay, there's an entity that's harassing you and killing people, okay. And as the audience member, is extremely frustrating because even though Maddie's story is extremely outlandish, it's the truth and they're not believing her. And like a lot of women in our own society, when they go to tell the police be acting like the women be telling the most fantastical story. One of my favorite YouTubers of all time, Kenny JD, she did a video talking about the Netflix documentary about like this crazy ex who was literally harassing woman after woman. And everybody was like, yo, if the police had done their job the first time and got this man in jail the first time, then the second woman wouldn't have had to gone through all of the violence and abuse that she went through. But like I said, it's ACAB, it's ACAB, it's ACAB. Don't make me bring up all of the rape kits that are literally collecting dust because nobody wants to investigate. Don't make me bring it up. And then that leads me into my next section, which is the horror of forced birth and forced pregnancies. When I first originally watched this movie, we still had Roe v. Wade. And it's been, I want to say, years. Hey Alexa, when was Roe v. Wade taken away?
According to an Alexa Answers contributor, on June 24, 2022, the Supreme Court case Roe v. Wade was overturned.
Yikes. I don't know if you heard my girl Alexa, but it's been 2 years since we officially lost Roe v. Wade. And as somebody who is obsessed with like medical techs, I mean, I'm literally a nurse. Like this is low-key my job. Like I'm not an OB nurse or labor and delivery nurse, but I have a lot of friends who are. And seeing the direct effects of what the world has become because we no longer have Roe v. Wade has scared me to my very core. I don't even know if I want to talk about the movie or if I want to talk about the real life situation, but overall it's just such a mess. But for the sake of me not getting too off track, I want to talk about the nonsense that happened in the movie and how a lot of women are actually living this hell in real life. So despite the movie's continuous portrayals of violence towards women, the saddest and most brutal parts of the movie has to be in the third act, where we finally get to know the backstory and the real connection between Gabriel and Maddie. And like I told you with the whole me ranting about Roe v. Wade, it has to do with the horror of forced birth. Yay! But not yay, it's actually really depressing. Despite the movie's continuous portrayal of violence against women, the most brutal and overall disturbing part of the movie happens in its third act, and it has to do with forced birth and what happens after forced birth. So we have to go way back in the timeline, right? Before the whole Maddie dreamscape phenomenon, as well as before the intro, right? We have to go back like borderline decades. So if you guys haven't pieced together the big twist or whatever, I'm gonna tell you right here and now. Gabriel and Maddie are actually siblings. In fact, they're not even just siblings. I think the proper terminology is conjoined twins, but the reason why Maddie and Gabriel were even born was because of the whole idea of a forced pregnancy. So Maddie and Gabriel's mom was actually a 15-year-old girl who was born into a very religious society. And if you know anything about if you're a teen mom and you're forced to be in a very religious setting, you already know where I'm going. At 15 years old, this girl, who is sadly Maddie and Gabriel's mom, was SA'd, forced to keep the baby, and she was pressured to keep the baby by all of the adults around her, and she had to give birth to Maddie and Gabriel. Because of this one awful situation, that's how we get involved with all of the nonsense that we see throughout the movie. And even though I really wish that this was just a fantastical horror movie scenario, a lot of women are forced to go through stuff like this. And not every woman who is forced to go through a pregnancy that is A, non-viable or B, unwanted is a victim of SA. There are just so many recent cases of me filming this. I'm filming this September 25th, 2024, of women who were forced to keep unviable pregnancies whose lives were forever ruined because of this nonsense. The overturning of Roe v. Wade has literally damned so many women to death, and this could have all been prevented if the Supreme Court wasn't stacked the way it is. We're literally living in a hellscape. The most recent case that I'm thinking about is due to the fact that all of the abortion guidelines now are cooked, a lot of doctors are now willing to lose their license for anyone. So they literally wait until these mothers are at death's door before they save them, when before the overturning of Roe v. Wade, these women would have had actual access to good health care. So you could have saved me before I was dying, but now I have to wait until I die. And surprisingly, when you wait for someone to be on the brink of death's door, they have a higher likelihood of dying. And so many women have either died or lost their ability to have kids just because of this nonsense. The overall fear that our society has for a woman who is in control of her body is maddening. And even for the Republicans who are so adamant that they want to care about the lives of the unborn, putting women through this is actually evil, and we are seeing the ramifications of that. This is the portion of my video where I'm supposed to do like a conclusion statement, but overall, when I wrote this script, I had hope. I think I wrote this script when Malignant came out, which has to be around 2022 when I was still in undergrad. And now that I'm seeing all of the women whose lives have been lost, all of the husbands who've lost their wives, all of the children that have lost their mothers because we could not be serious and let women have autonomy over their own body, I don't even have a positive way to end this video. I really wish I could. Like, typically when I do these sad, depressing videos, I end the video off on a good note. Like in my weaponized incompetence video, I talked about what we can do if your partner is using weaponized incompetence for you. But the Supreme Court has literally damned us. And I don't even know what to say. All I can even think to say is that if you're thinking of voting in the 2024 election for someone who has put so many people in the position of Maddie and put so many people in the position of Maddie's mom, I would definitely just think twice. Let the current situation of our world ruminate in your mind. I can't tell you how to vote because that's your constitutional right, but just think about how many more women will end up like Maddie. If you guys like this video, please hit the thumbs up button. It really helps push the video in the algorithm. I don't even know what I want y'all to comment. This video was depressing for me to even film. Please hit the bell and notification button because all of October and even for November, I'm definitely going to be giving y'all this Ella Enchanted series, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.